cheaters are probably something we've all come across, whether it be intentionally or unintentionally. But there are four kind of different types. And Brandon, why don't you kind of walk us through what you've seen, kind of how you differentiate, and then we can kind of all talk about our experiences with those.
Okay, so cheating kind of comes in two forms, at least to me. One is intentional cheating, someone who shows up at the table and knows they're going to play a game by a different set of rules than you are, and are not telling you what those rules are. And then the unintentional cheater is the person who comes to play a game, thinks that you're both playing on the same set of rules, and is just wrong and don't know that they're wrong, and then ends up kind of shorting you a little bit on your gameplay. So we'll talk about the two kinds. So I'll throw some images up here.
Please
Uh,
tell me you have the Jesse Ventura. It's not cheat, or if you're not cheating, you're not trying.
no, I've got it's not cheating at strategy, which is kind of one player, and then oh, you forgot that rule, didn't you? Also from Goldfinger, I think.
Yep.
But the two camps of cheaters. So the it's not cheating at strategy guy. How do you tell it's this guy? This guy is so say there's an instance that'll happen that could be either one. So say they're rolling extremely fast. They pick up their dice, they roll it. They don't give you a chance to look at the dice. They go for them, they pick them up. Maybe they're throwing them behind a building. Um, maybe they're throwing them where that you don't see them. Maybe they're using dice that are purposely really hard to read, like the Imperial Knight dice. Super hard to read.
Oh man,
The
those are tough to read.
the
Yeah.
Nurgle dice. Cool idea. Also, extremely hard to read. So then, so you have that instance. That instance is telling you, I'm playing a game by a different set of rules than this person potentially. So how do you differentiate which person, which camp is going? Is this the intent? Is there intent or is there not intent? Essentially, and that's where you have to open up conversation with the person you're playing with. You could ask him like, "Hey man, I didn't see that dice roll. Are you hitting on fours or are you hitting on fives?" And then the guy could be like, "Oh well, I'm hitting on fours," or he should answer you. I mean, no matter who this person is, they should answer you. But you could read by their body language and even by bringing up the idea that you wanted to look at dice rolls. If the person is a genuine with you and the person says, "Oh, well let me roll these over here then," or let me show you what's going on. That person is definitely in the "oh, I forgot the rule, didn't you" category. They're not cheating you because they want to. They may feel the pressure of the clock. They might be one of their first tournaments, and that person's not someone that I feel should be looked down upon for what they're doing. Now, on the other hand, if you say, "Hey, I'd like to see the dice, um, just so that I know and I could, get my wound dice ready and I don't have to rely on you for it," put that on yourself. If that person still keeps doing it, or if you notice that that person has the same 6 dice out of his 30 that he picks up every single time to do his saves, like, and won't go, and if you ask them to, still won't go to a different set of dice, maybe that person is the "it's not cheating, it's strategy" kind of guy, where it would be more important for him to win the game than to have a good game. Now, have you guys run into any of this in your tournaments? Like, have you played against people or you thought maybe playing a different set of rules than you?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And how would you
I think.
guys deal with that?
So personally, I always dealt with it kind of the same way you did. I always was like, hey, just so I know what I'm doing, do you mind rolling those here, or like, can I take a look at those dice? Because you're right, those Nurgle dice, you almost have to memorize what those look like, because each one of them is very different, each side, and so there are those that are like, yeah, sure, that's great, or like the Nurgle dice. If you're playing against somebody who's playing an all Nurgle army, and it's very fluffy army and not somebody's gonna throw it down your throat, it's you can forgive some of the quick rolling. The other thing is the thing I always see is the fast hands on those two. Sometimes you're always watching, you're like, hey, do you mind just picking up this set, or they're like picking up I always say pick up your misses and leave the hits. And so usually people are pretty accommodating if you say that. There are a couple that I've caught some attitude from. That just means I have to stand on their side of the table when I play them.
Yeah. And
And
that is
you're
a
not a
good way
little
of
guy.
handling it. That's a good way of communicating, like, hey, can you pick up your misses? That way every dice that should be left should be above a certain value.
Right.
And it's good when you're playing that, then, that if you think that you're on the giving end of this fast dice, maybe you're trying to work under a clock and you don't want to seem like you're cheating the person. It'd be a good tip to use.
I tell you, working under a clock there's a lot of pressure there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Real quick, there's a comment here that says somebody's using gravity dice now. I'm unfamiliar with those.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Well, he also mentioned standardizing the dice. I like that idea, but the problem with that is that you would limit, like, there's a lot of teams at these large tournaments that show up with, for instance, like we have Team Bad Decisions dice, where I think our 6s are the Team Bad Decisions logo.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you'd have to have some leeway in the standardization. Like, say you can only have one symbol on your die, because you get a lot of them where they'll have like the 6s and the 1s are symbols, and I'm like, wait a minute, what?
Like
So that's not a
like
bad
the
idea.
G-Dub ones are bad. The old G-Dub ones are real bad for that. Those are so hard to read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, at the top tables, don't they give you a set of like actual casino Vegas dice? And I think at LVO they do that, don't they?
I don't know.
Maybe at LVO, but
They only give you like 20 dice, and those are the only dice you're allowed to use if you're at the top tables. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And they're the actual, like, big, thick, like, clear with the white spot Vegas casino dice.
Those gravity dice are pretty easy to read.
Yeah.
They're kind of the casino style dice.
Yeah, they are.
Okay. So that's probably what the name of them is then, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, he said, yeah, at LVO they're doing that. Which, at the top tables, I mean, that's a thing. That makes sense, because there has been instances of dice attempted
Manipulation.
cheating. Yeah, possible cheating at top tables before and stuff like that.
I have seen those people do where they take the dice and then they keep bumping them with their hand as they're counting. You ever see that one where they keep like, oh, look, I found another hit.
Yeah, they're like, oh, maybe it's not like I'm gonna get an extra hit. It's like, maybe if I bump this, I might get it. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing, and it kind of goes into table etiquette more so than just cheating, but discussing with the other player before the game or any dice are even rolled what a cocked die means. Does a cocked die mean you're going to re-roll it? Does a cocked die mean you're going to take whatever the majority face is? Or you're going to try and do a balanced dice on it? I try and have that conversation and what every piece of terrain means. Because those are the two feel badsy things that'll happen during a game where you're
Yeah.
not trying to cheat someone, but you're playing under the intention that that's a forest or that's a ruin.
Right.
And they're playing under the intention of that's impassable terrain. So
I definitely do the terrain one. I'll have to start doing the dice one. That's a good idea, because there are plenty of times when you're playing, and I know I'm staying consistent with what I think a cocked dice is, but I've seen them take like a 6, and that one's not cocked, but that one is definitely cocked.
yeah,
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
yeah. And the one
mean,
oh, sorry, go on.
I would say I personally play if it touches anything but the actual flat surface of the table, it's cocked, no matter what. Just get rid of all outliers.
Yeah.
You've been to
Everything.
that tournament before where they have those crazy boards that are like supposed to be lava boards, and there are a bazillion
Yeah.
cracks in the board, and you're not gonna get that.
Yeah, it's a pain.
Yeah,
It's a pain.
I like doing for cocked dice, just taking another dice and sitting right on top of it. And if it slides off, re-roll it. If it stays flush with it, it's good.
And
It's
that works sometimes, Kenny. But if you're gonna play another guard player and you're shooting 60 dice per squad, and you've got 10 squads to go through, that can get rough.
yeah, it can. It can. I've played other guard players, and I think at least with most guard players, because of the heavy shooting, at least I try to tend to find the most open spot to roll so that there's a less of a chance of there being a cocked dice. If anything, I may get that dice that lands on top of another one, and then I just re-roll that one.
Gotcha.
Has anybody ever used a dice tray when they're at tournaments?
Yeah.
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 They're phenomenal. They're phenomenal. You can pick it up and literally hand it to your opponent and be like, look, that's what I got. Like, they're amazing.
Yeah. I've never taken one, but I've considered it.
Oh, the thing just came in. I was going to touch on it in the comment section. No on dice rolling apps. I will not play them at a tournament setting. I was shown once at a tournament how easy it was to jailbreak the person's phone in order to change the number values that the dice rolling app was pulling. So the dice rolling app was not in any way, shape, or form messed with, other than it took statistical data from the phone in order to do 18%, 18%, 18% for each face of the dice. The person was able to go into their phone, change their phone data to 30% fives, 30% sixes, 10% ones, 10% twos. Like, and then just did the dice rolling app as if it was normal, and then showed me that over time, like, you could really skew your numbers and never touch the app itself. So
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
personally, I won't play with a person who wants to run the app. Not because I innately don't believe that they're gonna like cheat me, but there's no way I can prove that they can't.
Yeah, and apps are not that hard to program, and it would be super easy to do exactly what Brandon's saying. I mean, you could literally just tell it to omit ones.
Okay, maybe
know.
it's super easy for you younger guys. Caveman like me. No, that
Well,
what just Brandon
caveman,
just explained to me was just blew my mind. I'm like, you can do that?
yeah,
Yeah.
caveman, don't let him play with it then.
I want to play against Kenny.
Okay, so that was kind of the dice way of things. There's another topic. Maybe we'll just touch on two of them. This time we'll move on to another topic. But the second one being movement or tricky things people are doing with movement. Because it's a big part of the game. Positioning, line of sight. And where I give some people leeway in the beginning of the game is I know that, and everyone who plays knows the distance of no man's land. So oftentimes that's 24 inches. So if I'm on the edge and I know you're on the edge, we are 24 inches apart. And what I've seen sometimes, and it wasn't intentional, I'm not saying anybody was trying to cheat me, but they moved a knight 12 inches up. So I know that that's 12 inches away. And then they go and they move a bunch of other things, and then eventually that knight goes to charge in the charge phase, and it's 10 inches away. Or it's 9 inches away and they're rolling 3 dice. Something that was a near impossible charge, and that I knew was a near impossible charge, and put my guys, deployed them in a way because I knew it was near impossible, isn't. And if I was going to call a judge to look at the table, I would have to explain in some sort of Rain Man theory how that knight could never have been there, because his evidence and his argument is that knight is 9 inches away. And it is. I can put a tape on it and show you it's 9 inches away. That charge is 9 inches. How have you guys seen any of that kind of play? Like, from those people of, like, maybe it's, oh, I forgot, maybe it got pushed when I accidentally elbowed this building and it moved my knight a little closer. Maybe it wasn't accidental. Maybe I asked, yeah, like, in that kind of
Brandon,
theory.
you were a witness to a game I played where, well, I had guys in contact, and then all of a sudden they were less than a half inch away from each other, and then he could move away from my close combat guys that had that character locked down.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I was able to recover, but that was pretty rough, and I don't know. I didn't know where to hit the gas on that, like in the argument, and we didn't really solve it there, except for just to let it go, because it was a friendly game. It wasn't at a tournament, but the thing I see in a lot of tournaments that I always have to catch people doing is the measuring from the front of the base, and then when they move it, they put the back of the base at the end of the ruler.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Yeah.
A lot.
So,
That,
what do you do? How do you bring that up to someone without it being confrontational? Because everyone wants to have a fun game of 40K. Like, our intention is to have a fun game of 40K. We don't want to be giant dicks running around.
I
But
always ask like what they do with the measurement there. There are people that have created sticks that will that are exactly the right measurement to make up for the distance there. And then also I always gauge on, does it matter? Like, is there somebody out there that's, if they're trying to run it down my throat, I definitely am going to catch them. But if it's like, I don't know, I've played against newer players before too that were doing that, and I'll talk to them about it after the game. You know, like, hey, you realize that's a 13-inch move and not a 12-inch move now.
Yeah.
That's how I've dealt with that. But I mean, it's different everywhere you go because it really depends on who you're playing against for that one.
I think the best way I've ever done it is if, like, for a night, I couldn't tell you what the movement is, so I'll ask them, what's their movement again? And then, like Brandon said, if they had it sitting at the edge of no man's lane, you should be able to go, okay, yeah, that shouldn't happen. That's how I just do it. I just ask what the movement was, unless I already know, and then when I already know, then I'm kind of like Nick. Does it really matter at this point or not?
The weird part comes though is when, so say like you have this instance with Brandon's instance, you got a knight that moves 12 inches, accidentally it moved 13 or 14 inches. You have to call a judge. Now essentially what you've gotten into is a he said she said. You know, you're kind of stuck because you're like, judge, he moved his knight 14 inches, and he's like, no, I didn't, and the judge is like, well, I can't ask you where the knight used to be because you're gonna say it was here, you're gonna say it was... So there, movement cheating is like a really weird place where it's almost impossible to police, and unless it's you doing the actual policing. And it's weird because the movement phase is so like, you don't really pay attention to movement phase, you know, especially when you have got like things can move 24 inches and stuff like that. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, that jumps halfway across the table, makes total sense. And then as soon as the assault phase hits, you're like, nope, you are a half a centimeter too far. So it's a weird thing where it almost has to be like, you've got to be up on watching them. You're your own best policeman in this sense.
yeah.
I like in the chat, there's two different ones that were talking about in the chat. Was the movement tray. That one's tough to police. But the other one I see a lot, and that's a good point, is the pile-in and consolidation. Just because it's so hard to measure, even if you're not trying to cheat it. So so the other side of the argument is how do you police yourself in those scenarios? Because measuring that 3-inch consolidation movement can be tricky, you know what I mean? And you don't want to take advantage of somebody intentionally. And I feel like there are times where you're like, all right, did I already move this guy? Especially if you got like 50 guys wrapped into a melee, you know, those kind of things. And then how do you police those people that are doing it intentionally?
Like, so the way I try and fix most all of this, and it goes with a lot of these things, is just explaining intent beforehand and then expressing intent and communicating as much as possible. I know that we don't play in a sport where a lot of us are the best social people in the world, but explaining that my berserkers are 8 inches away now, or they're 14 inches away, I'm going to move them 7, and then saying that out loud with them, I'm moving them 7 because they can move 7. I'm going to be 7 inches away, and then I will put 2 dice down saying that charge is 7 inches. It'll say 7 right next to that unit. So that gives my opponent the visual of they're 7 inches away. And even if they move, say I accidentally knock my soda over and I pull my models away to be like, oh no, and then clean up the soda, those dice will stay there. They're 7 inches away. When they get put back, even if they're 5 inches away, I will roll a 7 on those dice because that's what I communicated with you was my intent. And even when I go to pile in, I will say, I'll have that little 3-inch widget, which is great. I'll put it down and I'll be like, this guy can make it here. Do you agree? And I don't move it. I don't do anything until we have communicated buy-in between me and the person I'm playing with. that this is what's going to happen. Because a lot of competitive Warhammer takes like 3 turns. At the end of turn 3, at the end of turn 2, you pretty much know who's going to win that game. Sometimes it's dice related, sometimes it's just matchup related, but you don't need to run it down their throat turn 3, turn 4, turn 5. If you set up your game well and everything is going well and you're communicating well, turns 1 and turns 2, the rest of the game should flow without any issue. Because you'll know you're getting stomped and it won't matter. Or you'll know that you're running it to him because the dice did it or because you outplayed him, and then it won't matter then either. But just communicating well, I think, helps with all of that. Oh, yeah, Berserkers move 6?
Big.
My bad. The whole argument was invalid because Berserkers only move 6. I don't play Chaos, I'm sorry.
Over. But you're right. I think that communicating the amount of movement that you've moved versus, hey, I'm going to move this much, which will put me in this range for a charge or this range for a shot, it's super simple. It's literally like one sentence, and then move on. And
you could even, if you want to be cheeky, you're playing this I'm mind games thing, which I love playing mind games, as long as you stay on the border of I'm not cheating you mind games. Go ahead and move your knight 12 inches, and then explain, in the assault phase, I have a stratagem that allows him to advance and charge. So I will advance him, roll your 2 dice because you're using this or so household, and explain that too. And then move real close and be like, this is a 6-inch charge, and in the assault phase, I can use a stratagem, which already puts his mind in that he's going to get charged there, and then don't do it. Have the entire intention that you were never going to do it in the first place because you were saving CP for something else. You're saving CP for exploding something in the other way. But being open and honest could be used even as a tool to shape what your opponent thinks is going to happen, and help play mind games without being a dick about playing mind games.
For sure.